So, yeah, Digital Liberation Front. Me and y'all and me. Let me turn on my chat just in case somebody wants to talk. Hi, Shane. How you doing? So yeah, Tuesday, election eve, and yeah, tension is in the air. I can feel my anxiety going up. Fortunately, I grow cannabis, so that kind of helps. But yeah, I can feel my anxiety on the rise, and rightfully so. We had the ramrod swearing in of Amy Coney Barrett, and unless we have a landslide of an election, we are pretty much locked into, a contested election. It's going to happen. And even with the landslide, I can tell you it's still going to be contested regardless, because Trump isn't trying to go to jail. It's not going to happen. He's not trying to go to jail anytime soon. So unless, some olive branch is extended across the aisle, guaranteeing him some kind of backdoor exit by Joe Biden and the Democrats and Kamala Harris and the Democratic establishment, I do not see him, just walking off into the night. He's got people standing back and standing by, and you see a bunch of stuff going down across the board as far as elections are concerned. You're seeing, election fraud. There was a guy arrested for trying to file a ballot for his dead mother. This is all on the right now. I mean, we're not seeing I haven't seen any leftist stories, or if there are leftist stories about, election tampering or rigging or whatever, feel free to post in my timeline and tag me and say, Brandon, haha, here it goes, or whatever. Please let it be from a reputable source, because I prefer to use logic, facts, and reason whenever we are dealing with situations like this. But to make a long story short, we're seeing intimidation. We're seeing ballot harvesting going on, legalized ballot harvesting, I guess, out in California. Republicans have put out fake ballot boxes where individuals are encouraged to deposit their ballots. I don't know what's supposed to happen with those ballots after they've been harvested. Technically, they're supposed to go to, the Republicans are saying that they're going to go to official sources or whatever, places that can count the vote, but we're supposed to just trust them that they're going to do that. But yeah, those ballot boxes were found to be okay. They can be legal. So basically, if you're dumb enough to put your ballot into a Republican ballot box out there, and we recognize there's a lot of people who are uninformed, then that ballot can potentially, be lost. You're just basically trusting somebody to hand your ballot in. And so, yeah, I feel some type of way right now. Yeah, and someone did set a ballot box on fire. That was a whole other thing that I saw too. So somebody set a ballot box on fire. Yeah, there's a lot of manipulations. There's been voter intimidation at some of the polls, I believe in Michigan, I think here in North Carolina too. Word exchanges and everything. We still haven't hit election day, and we pretty much anticipate that's going to be the big day, where everybody who is last minute voting, which you shouldn't have been doing anyway, but everybody who's last minute voting is going to be out there trying to get theirs in. At the same time, tensions are going to be running high, and there's an opportunity to create a volatile situation, which might be exploited by right-wing extremists. We're finding that right-wing extremism is on the rise. Multiple states around the country, multiple major cities around the country have developed some kind of deployment model for election day, anticipating this. What is disturbing to me is Christopher Wray basically has a report on violent right-wing extremism that he's not going to release till after the election. I would think that you would want to release that now. I'm hoping that, the FBI and, state sheriffs and law enforcement agencies, they're all working hand in hand, exchanging information to make sure, none of these, extremists get through as far as their kidnapping plans. We had one individual from here in North Carolina who had basically, had some serious intentions of assassinating Joe Biden. So we're seeing all of the tricks. We're seeing all of the stops being pulled. And these stops would not be getting pulled. That's another main reason why I know this election is going to be contested, is because you would not see these coordinated efforts going down if these individuals felt there was going to be any kind of blowback, any kind of consequence for their behavior, because they're doing some pretty heinous stuff, like stuff that should get you federal time. So you don't go all in like this unless you got this in the bag, because I don't know anybody who's trying to do any kind of federal time. I also don't believe, while I mentioned that point about Biden potentially pardoning Trump or whatever, I don't believe that Trump is trying to go out like that. I don't believe he's trying to be pardoned, because we've read about the enormous amount of debt he has due. So even if he is pardoned, then he's basically, submitting himself to the criminal justice system. He's submitting himself to whoever his debtors are, whatever consequences, because that's the thing too. He's not making any money through his properties. His properties are bleeding money, except for Mar-a-Lago and Trump Tower, where he's basically funneling the government business that he's doing through them. So he's basically using the government as this huge ass money laundering scheme. We the people are functioning out of Mar-a-Lago. He's charging Secret Service, like I think it was like $4 per glass of water when he held an event one time. God knows how much water they drank. But ain't no fucking water, $4 a glass. So it's that little nickel and diamond he's doing every single time he's down there. He's bleeding us dry. So when people talk about, Trump, he's giving up his salary. He's like getting over on us in so many fucking ways. And all this stuff, can come to a head if he loses power. That's why he's not trying to lose power. And that's why Amy Coney Barrett had to be sworn in before the election, because now, since they're swearing in, everything that takes place from this point until she dies is within her federal jurisdiction as far as being able to deliberate when it comes to the Supreme Court. So the election coming up now falls in her federal jurisdiction. So she can be involved and she can say, if Trump is ahead on election night, she can say, hey, she can agree with the Supreme Court, agree with whatever ruling that, the election should be called right there, right then. No more mail-in ballots, nothing else coming through. If you want to contest it, you're going to have to do it to the courts and go back up and challenge the Supreme Court and blase. But he's going to be installed at that point. So, what you going to do? How are you going to, in the meantime, or do we have some suspended interim president that's going to be going down? No, he's going to hold office until we get everything sorted out, until we figure out where everybody's coming from and, what's happening and who's in charge. We're just going to instate the state of martial law right now because I'm still the president. And we can talk about, after January of the next year, whatever, suddenly, he loses power automatically. But that's the people who are believing in that are going off this idea that Trump respects any kind of decorum. If he can get a challenger position, which is what he's going to do no matter how the election falls. If he's ahead, he's going to call it in his favor. If he's behind, he's going to say, we need more time to count more ballots until I can get ahead, and then I'll call it then. He's trying to call the count right whenever it fits him. So it's going to be, a head-to-head moment that can be contested. At that point, whenever he steps into, the world stage as, this dictator in doubt, that's where he's going to have to lay down the law, and that's where you're going to see the extreme shit start to kick in. And the military has said that they're going to fall back. That they're not going to be involved. I doubt that's going to be the case. I think it'll start off like that initially, but then as things start to come to a head, they will be involved in some shape, form, or fashion. And I also anticipate there's going to be some military action at some point that's going to stretch us different ways, which brings me to what I'm talking about tonight in regard to, bigots and ballots and all this other bullshit. So one key aspect of fascism is the fact that it attacks on multiple fronts. That's what we're seeing. So you don't see one scandal that people can harp on and focus on and drill down into and go and interview every single mistress that Trump has ever had, if we're talking about an affair or whatever. Like, by the time you've exhausted your manpower chasing that, there's another scandal going on. In this case, it's involving, the schools, our education, and private education, not basically forgiving student loans and whatnot. So we're focusing on that drama. Every single institution is limited in regard to the amount of manpower it can throw at a particular story. They have limited bandwidth, just like we do. We are as limited as our faculties are. I got 2 pairs of eyes. I got 2 ears. I got 1 nose, 1 mouth. I'm 1 body to detect the universe. So I can only engage particular instances, but so long. You also get fatigued. That's why a lot of people are checking out of the news. They don't want to pay attention. A news agency is the same way. They can take these bodies and assign them in different places, but if there's something going on in the military, something going on in budgets and spending, something going on in regard to treason, something going on in regard to affairs, very quickly, no matter what your news institution is, you're all over the place. And so at some point, coordination has to happen between news agencies to get one unified message up. Otherwise, it's just everybody running all over the place. So when people talk about the media working together and coordinating attacks and coordinating messaging, the fact is journalism is under attack. And so I don't doubt that journalists are focusing on whatever narratives are being advanced and trying to coordinate their efforts to do so. And you can call it the deep state or whatever it is, but they are actually applying to the limitations that we have as human beings in regard to what we can focus on and for how long. So fascism pulls you in all these different directions. And as you're pulling to these different directions, some people are going to be concerned about children. Some people are going to be concerned about police brutality. Some people are going to be concerned about, the financial crisis. Some people are going to be concerned about COVID because, they have elderly members in their family or they're at risk. And so you have all of these different directions you're being pulled. And while you're being pulled these different directions, the fascists are moving straight down the middle with whatever their agenda is, which is why the Amy Coney Barrett nomination was able to be pushed through. It wasn't just the majority, it was the fact that we are exhausted when it comes to what we can focus on, what we can see, what we can address, and what we can deal with. And that's understandable. That's how it's going to be. So how do we address this if we recognize this is how it's going to be and for the foreseeable future? Because COVID's not going away anytime soon. They're finding that basically after you've been exposed to it, you can get some antibodies, and those antibodies will last with you for a couple of months, and then you can catch it again. So the talk about herd immunity, especially without a vaccine, is absurd as a result of that. Because at no point can you get immune and stay immune and be a cancellation point instead of a vector point for this disease. At any point, you can acquire it again in the future from what science is telling us. And those results often stack. So if you have lung damage from the first time you had COVID, okay, that's still there. Now, COVID, the sequel comes through and you extra fucked up on top of what you were already scarred from. So people are pulled in all these different directions. And now comes the tribalism. Now comes the point where we are all heightened in regard to what is important to us. We had another hashtag today, another young brother who had a mental health, crisis going down, gunned down, shot, I think it was like 9 times per cop. There's like 7 to 9 cons per cop. And yeah, so was it Baltimore, I believe? Correct me if I'm wrong. But the fact is, we got another one. So people of color like myself, you know, I'm tuned into both the political side and both, you know, the social justice side. So I was already feeling some type of way about Amy Coney Barrett and that fascist bullshit. And then now we got these cops who are obviously dealing with an individual in the street who had a knife in his hand. Meanwhile, Kyle Rittenhouse can walk past the cops after murdering multiple people, confirmed kills, murdering multiple people, and go back to his home across state lines and turn himself in later on. So that hypocrisy is on display with this killing. And the fact that these officers, I mean, y'all couldn't have tased them. I mean, there are 2 of y'all. So if y'all hit him from the both sides with 2 different tasers, y'all could have done it. But you couldn't have exercised any kind of force that was nonviolent, shot him in the leg the way Joe Biden talked about, you know, just done something beyond, you know, just shooting dead in the street. Is what it is. But that's part of where my concern is. Women on edge right now because this woman that's been appointed to the Supreme Court looks like she's probably going to be coming for reproductive rights. If that case lands in front of her, they know where she's going to stand. So they're pulled in that direction. Meanwhile, we have 540 some kids without parents that have been lost. So, you know, people are about child abuse, you know, members of the Latina community, they feel some type of way about that situation. And so now comes the part where we're all prioritizing what's important to us, what we can deal with and what we can handle and who we're going to focus on in regard to our struggle. And so what I envision after the elections, whether they go good or go bad, and good meaning that, you know, Biden wins and there's like some unrest. Biden would have to win by a landslide. That's the biggest thing. He's got to win by a landslide. And I'm hoping that will happen, but it's going to have to happen early. It's going to have to happen at the beginning. But Trump will still try to keep it open. He'll still try to keep it open until we can get to a point where you can be ahead in the polls. At some point, it's going to happen. I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but at that point, that's going to be his point of contention. That's where he's going to try to call it off. But yeah, so we're all pulling these different directions. And as we are being pulled in our different directions, this is where we're going to start getting picked off. You'll have a couple people picked off at a Black Lives Matter rally because another hashtag went down. These protests have to be addressed. Breonna Taylor still has not received justice, blah, blah, blah. We'll have women's rallies. We'll have a couple people picked off there too. And so bit by bit, as people try to rise, as people try to fill the streets in protest of these events and whatnot, these messed up situations, you're going to have individuals made examples of, incarcerated, killed, and with the criminal justice system backing Trump with all these judges that have been installed because the courts were packed. We talk about this court packing by the Democrats, but we're ignoring the fact that the courts were held open by Mitch McConnell, just like he did with Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat, just like he did with Merrick Garland's seat, holding these positions open, but then also down at the local level, all of these federal justices installed. All right. So you're going to see all these rulings that are in defense of these actions that are being taken. And it's not going to be just defending the police in regard to their actions. We're already seeing that in regard to qualified immunity and Breonna Taylor. What we're going to see is defense in regard to supporter actions. And I talked about this a little bit in a previous video. I believe I was driving in the car, but I want to reiterate that right now. This is the point where they're going to start using you against you. This is the point where your bigotry, your biases, your gut reactions are going to be used to escalate situations to the favor of individuals who want you incarcerated, dead, or just gone, period. Case in point, I have a friend of mine, she's a white female in an interracial relationship with a black dude. Nice couple, great people. And they're supposed to be going on a trip to the mountains here in North Carolina, where they'll be staying at a cabin, and they'll be back, before the elections hit on Tuesday. But I had to caution her. I was like, look, you're out there in these backwoods, in literal mountain space, and I know your boyfriend cares about you immensely. So if there's some racists out there, who see the two of you all together and they want to start something, they might come at you and say something untoward and call you out your name. And of course, rising to your defense, your boyfriend's going to turn and be like, what the fuck did you just say to my woman? What the fuck did you just say to me? What the fuck did you just say about us? And potentially advance on an individual out of being chivalrous, out of wanting to protect honor. And at that point, he becomes an aggressor. He gets put down and he's gone. And we're marching around, hashtagging it up, court case pending. Then court case comes and these individuals get off. Or if they're convicted, they escalate past that judge until they can get to the federal level. And then Amy Coney Barrett, who has said that, using the word nigger is not something that's inflammatory. It's not something that's, that makes a workplace hostile. That's who was just appointed to the Supreme Court. So at that point, if that was the fighting word that was used at that point that escalated things, then Amy can, basically, get her off. And then we've legalized calling people nigger across the nation in any situation, any given time. I mean, you can do it now, but a reaction isn't going to be as warranted anymore. This is where the bigotry comes out. And it's unleashed and it's codified into law. This is where fascism, authoritarianism is codified into law. If you're on the side of the party, they're going to be making a mockery of the law and utilizing the law to justify the most heinous fucked up shit that they do. So this is why we have to join together, even though our instinct right now is to go into our different corners. Our instinct is to say, I'm black, so I need to be over here. I'm gay, so I'm over here with the LGBTQ people. I am Muslim, so I'm going to be over here with the Muslim people. I'm Asian, so I'll be over here with the Asian people. And so our identity politics is slowly used against us to divide us so we can be picked off. But if we coordinate events, if we recognize that we have the same goals, the same agenda, and we can get behind a coordinated event, it's going to be harder for them to bring us down. Where there's talk right now of national strikes. I'm in support of that. Basically, all of us choosing a day or a couple days to stop, or a couple weeks. Now, how is this going to work? Because we talked about a lot. I mean, people talk about the civil rights and the civil rights movement and what people were about doing with the marches and the dogs and whatnot. But yeah, there was a goal there. There were a couple goals. One was to show the world how we are treated, how our government treats us here in America. So it's supposed to create some global sense of shame and pressure America on a world stage to do the proper thing, considering the fact that we considered ourselves leaders. But the problem in this environment right now is the fact that there's a lot of leaders around the world who think like Trump, and that's the only people that he cares. Those are the only opinions he cares about. By far, when it comes to Duterte in the Philippines, when it comes to MBS in the Saudis, when it comes to North Korea and how they run their country, when it comes to Xi Jinping and what he's doing in regard to the Uyghur Muslims, like we're we're still leaders, I guess, because we aren't as brutal as them. So I guess being the least brutal dictator is what Trump is able to hide behind. But yeah, we're still seeing, forced hysterectomies at concentration camps. We're still, losing parents of children and conducting genocide. That's literally genocide, according to the Geneva Conventions. Taking children away from their parents permanently, not a temporary separation where you have the parents over here and the children over here, and they'll get back together once you figure out what the situation is. Permanently losing their parents because you had no intention of ever reconnecting them again, and selling those children into adoption homes, some of them being molested and abused by ICE guards. So, we're literally sex trafficking as a country. That's what we're supporting right now. So, Trump isn't that much better. But the fact is, that's the only opinion he cares about right now. So shaming when it comes to, that weapon of the civil rights movement that used to exist whenever we had higher standards, when we cared about more, when our bandwidth was much more narrow, is not going to work on a global scale. It's just not. But the other aspect of the civil rights movement that is going to work is the volume, is the actual presence, the group consensus. That's what a march is. That's what voting is. Voting is a asymmetrical march that takes place across borders, across state lines. We're all in consensus in saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. So that's why everybody's inspired by these long lines, because we know that a good majority of the people who are in those long lines recognize the importance of voting this year in a way that they didn't before. And a lot of them are wearing masks too. So by Trump making masks such a political thing, we're able to eyeball and see who's on board with protecting their neighbors, who's on board with showing consideration for other people, and we're seeing who just doesn't give a fuck. And a good number of people seem to be on board with caring. I voted here in rural North Carolina. I saw people with masks. I saw people without them. Whenever we had to go inside the actual voting facility, you saw people. Everybody had to have them on. But outside, that's pretty much where you saw the Trumpism trumped up, because people weren't always standing 6 feet away from one another. Individuals, in groups and clusters and whatnot. It was evident. But I digress. We've made caring about people a political statement. That's where we are right now. So come Tuesday, we are all collectively, that's the culmination of this collective march that we've made via voting, via voting, whether it be early voting, in-person voting, dropping your ballot. They're saying right now, that's another thing too, side note, if you have your ballot, your mail-in ballot, I know in Missouri, you're still required to mail that ballot back in. You can't drop it off on site. But I want to reinforce what I'm hearing across the board is, if you have your mail-in ballot and you have not mailed it in, do not mail it in. Take it physically to your polling location and turn it in manually to somebody. Preferably don't put it in anybody's ballot box or whatever. I recommend polling locations, because there are people watching those polls, and B, no one has to this day, to my knowledge, gone up into a polling location and set anything on fire or whatever at this juncture. But this civil rights movement that we have right now is going to have to be collective beyond just the act of voting. Because like I said, it's going to be contested either way. It's going to be contested until Trump gets the results he's looking for. Because the Senate's not trying to go away. And if Trump can get confirmed, then, everybody else can be insulated and protected. And then we can go down to the state level and figure out how we're going to game those systems and rig those systems. We haven't talked a lot about how elections are being rigged at that local level beyond Texas, which has shut down, ballot box delivery points. But yeah, every single state's going to have its own little bullshit, especially these swing states. And that's where these elections are going to be contested, and these individuals, who are like Lindsey Graham, who is hurting right now, Mitch McConnell, who's hurting right now in a way that he hasn't hurt before. It's not bad. Kentucky still hasn't gotten their shit right, but he's definitely taking some hits. So we got to get the guy in charge, and then we can go down to the local level. We can start gaming those elections. But if we are unified as a country, if we can get across our bigotry, if we can get across our differences, if we can be on board, if we can join unions, if we can form some kind of consensus in regard to how we're going to address this, we can shut down the country, because we recognize that that's the main reason why Trump wants the country open again, because that is the only thing that he's been able to use as justification for his authoritarianism, for his fascism. Otherwise, it's just violence. And none of these rich people are going to be going into their offices, exposing themselves to COVID, doing anything that's going to jeopardize their health and the health of their loved ones. It's not going to happen. So that means that it's still relying upon us. And that's why the time is now, because at some point when automation kicks in full gear and a good majority of us aren't needed, and that's coming closer every single year with the advancements in robotics and technology and drones, doing deliveries and stuff like that, soon driving an Uber won't even be financially viable, because you got automated cars. Why do I need somebody to drive me who might potentially have COVID? So with that being the case, the power in the hands of working people is as strong as it's ever going to be at this moment and point in time. If we don't push back collectively, if we don't coordinate our efforts across the board, then what will happen is you won't have leverage. There's not going to be any need for you. Otherwise, you're just hogging resources from a person who wants them, who's got more firepower, more land, more of a wherewithal to take what they want to take. And American imperialism is as American as America is itself. So if we're going to push back collectively, now is the time. But the key point is right now to be informed, to be connected. And this is another main reason why going across, as much as we want to retreat into ourselves, we have to go and interact with other people. We have to go and figure out what's going on with other struggles. We have to go and figure out what other people need, what other people are concerned about. We have to build a network now, because our network is going to be beneficial. Trump is going after government agencies that publish that have news related data. He's basically trying to create an authoritarian broadcasting system, utilizing pre-existing things like PBS and NPR, things that are media outlets that have been funded by our tax dollars. He's basically trying to say those media outlets are countering his ability to govern by undermining his positions with facts and data and logic. And so unless they get on board with what he's trying to say, the funding needs to be cut. Obviously, that money needs to be put elsewhere. And so by getting these government agencies to fight with one another over how far they're willing to go to capitulate to him, just so individuals at those agencies can keep their jobs, he's creating his own fascist mouthpiece beyond OAN, beyond Fox. And the OAN and Fox are not going to be going away anytime soon either. Breitbart, all those are still going to be there. They're just going to be reinforced with this public service data akin to the doctor numbers that we were getting from the CDC in regard to COVID. Oh, and did you hear COVID is gone? We're done. We defeated the pandemic. We're not going to fight it anymore. It's over. And we'll have these doctors coming through PBS and NPR on radio, and as well as from the CDC. So eventually, all of these labels from these networks, these different outlets, are going to align with the fascist pre-existing networks and outlets that have been lying. And so soon it's going to be the doctors, the scientists, the individuals who are not on those platforms, who need those platforms for validation, for publication. Those individuals will be like, well, maybe I need to change my narrative, or maybe I shouldn't report on that over there. And so with that being the case, that means that you and I and the people around us that we trust, who are intelligent, now we are the network. It's up to us to share proper knowledge about things that are going on, for us to mine the resources that we have individually to connect with one another so we can address whatever issues are in front of us. Government's about to go local in a way that it has not been in a long time. And this is the main reason why local offices are so important. Getting to know your local people who are in charge of your government is so important. But in order to influence those people at the local level, you have to have local coalitions. You have to have local coordinated efforts to pressure these individuals into doing what needs to be done. So you have to build a network with people who are around you. You have to figure out who your neighbors are, who your friends are. Now, this is where the fascists are ahead of us. They already have the symbology out there and how they communicate online in regard to what symbols are at their houses. You know, thin blue line flags, thin red line flags for firemen, Trump 2020 flags. All of these symbols help them to identify one another when they're out in public. Just not even wearing a mask helps them to identify one another when they're out in public, and how dedicated they are to this cult. But there's a lot of us who haven't tried to build that network because we figured everything was just going to, solve itself. Or we said, that's their problem over there. I'm fine where I am. The fact is, what 2020 should have shown you by now clearly, your vision should be clear in 2020, pun intended. It's that any fucking thing can happen. And if anything can happen, anyone around you can be a resource, can be that individual who watches your children while you're stuck in traffic because a protest is going on. Or someone can be, your next door neighbor could be the person who's telling you that white supremacists have been driving past your house during the day. They can tell from, the Trump 2020 stickers on the pickup truck because they're constantly going back and forth in front of your house. So you've got to build up these local resources. Because right now, when the chaos kicks in, that's when people start getting missing. If a riot's happening over here and you're at home with your family and some extremists are decide they want to go door to door in a particular neighborhood because, their next door app has allowed them to see, all the liberals in this area based off of some of their posts. They've been making lists and checking them twice. This chaos that's going on over here will be a great cover because all the cops are going to be over there. The best defense we have right now is not the ammo that we can get from the gun store. It's not the guns that you can find. It's the networks that you can build right now by checking in with people that you care about and getting to know people that you don't through whatever means you possibly can that's COVID friendly and COVID safe. We're all stuck at home right now. Now might be a time to reach out. What's your game plan? Do you have emergency contact lists? People, we're talking so much about what you're planning to vote, and that's important. But after this, if you are in danger, how do you communicate with your friends and your family? If your cell phones are lost, do you have a rendezvous point? You need to start having these conversations with the people around you. And you need to start expanding your network. Because for a lot of us, the data is already online. That's the thing. People are talking about lists left and right or whatever, but the fact is, if I was going to be worried about lists, I would have to stop caring. Because there's way too many fucking people who have exhibited some kind of intent toward violence when it comes to me and mine. Now, how serious they are, I have no idea. I have no idea. But the fact is, I know that there are people out there who are mentally imbalanced. There are people out there who are sadists. There are people out there who are sociopaths. There are people out there who want violence. They want it. They love it. They need it. They've been waiting for it. And that's the main reason why I posted what I posted to my timeline. That's the main reason why I show people what I deal with. It's not because I'm like, oh, boo-hoo, Brandon got called a nigger again. Like, that's been happening since I was a toddler. It doesn't faze me. It's so that you can understand that these individuals that you are dealing with out here, some of them are not to be reasoned with. They don't want to reason. They don't want to learn. They don't want to get smarter. They don't want to heal. There's no middle ground with them. They don't want to hold your hand and sing kumbaya. There are no magic words that can be said to them. They're going to compel them to not being racist pieces of shit. There's nothing that you can say. This is what they chose. This is where they're going with it. All the fucking way. This is what they want. And hopefully by seeing that, you can say, okay, well, Brandon, does have a point there. Maybe if I'm aware of people like this in my life, I should alert some authorities. Or I should let some people know what's going down. Or find some way to sabotage, their potential plans or whatever. But now is the moment where we have an obligation to bond with one another and to keep our heads on a swivel and inform other people about the potential dangers that are among us. You should not have any strangers in your circle right now. At some point, this is the problem. Over the past 4 years, a lot of people buried their heads in the sand in regard to their friends and their family members. And now that we're here at the 11th hour, they're like, oh my God, I never knew my husband was so racist. Because you never talked to him about this shit. You avoided it. Because you probably had some inkling that motherfucker was a diehard bigot, but you didn't want to convince yourself that that's the kind of person that you chose to spend the rest of your life with. But COVID has made you stay at home and recognize how white supremacy this dude happens to be. How much of a white supremacist he happens to be. Some of y'all learn things about your kids. Some of y'all learn things about your grandparents. Some of y'all learn things about your next door neighbor, your pastor even. There are some people who are conveniently able to check out. Because it's too much. They can't handle it. It's too much. It's too much. It's too much going on, Brandon. It's too much. But that's privilege in and of itself because there's people who can't check out. If you are in one of those concentration camps, that's not an option. Literally, you can't check out. You are stuck in that bitch until they deport you without your child. Or if you're an individual of color like myself, it's like, okay, when does the stand by order drop? Like, I haven't received any information about how that execution is supposed to take place. Do I get a heads up on it? Like, I feel like, it's almost like, whenever they used to hunt foxes in Europe, like a fox hunt. That's what it feels like. It feels like a fox gets at least advance notice. You get the little horn thing. You can smell the dogs coming. Like you get a little advance. I feel like if the racists are going to do that, we're going to drop the stand back and stand by. Can I get 20-second head start? Just send me a message or whatever. You can make it a reality show. If I survive, I'll be like, we can call it "Fuck the Fascists," where I just basically just run. I get a head start. Maybe we could hide guns all over North Carolina. If I can find it, I can hold people off. It'd be a great reality show. But people like myself can't check out because we have friends and family members who are still in it. If you, like I said, have health issues, you can't check out because COVID is being allowed to run rampant. And basically you're being told by your government, die. That's your choice right now. That's what we rushed Amy Coney Barrett through for and gave no relief, didn't execute any kind of War Powers Act, didn't figure out how we would get, any kind of controlled testing rolled out to businesses, institutions, schools, nothing. We tried everything under the sun not to do, and this is the result that we have. We've absolutely positively done our best to be ineffective. That's what we've done. So there's a lot of people who can't check out. A lot of people stuck in this. Those people, in my opinion, are the lifeblood of this resistance. Those are the people that you need to be making contact with. Those are the people that you need to be networking with because they're going to be the ones who are going to be the most informed about what the fuck is going on around you. Whenever you choose to check back in, whenever you take breaks away, when you come back, those are the people who are going to be able to let you know, hey, this shit went down while you were away. Because we have no choice but to be that informed. But even if we are informed, I recognize I can't see everything. So as far as women's rights are concerned, it's going to be up to, I can try to be informed about that, but I won't know what I'm looking at in regard to how important it is. I've spoken with a few women about contraception alternatives and what needs to be done for that. I've been told that I should buy, I should buy as much Plan B as I possibly can to give out to females as they need it potentially in the future. We should all be stockpiling Plan B or whatever. That's one thing. That was one article I read. But I'm not abreast of everything, no pun intended. I'm not abreast of everything that goes on with women. I'm not abreast of everything that goes on in regard to our military and our veterans. I'm not abreast of everything that goes on even with, the community that I belong to as far as, Black Lives Matter and what we're doing in regard to police brutality. So I need to have allies who are active in those different circles that I can talk to, that I can coordinate with, that I can show support for, because we're going to need their support when it comes to things that affect us in our circles, whoever you might be. And if you work across circles, if you happen to be in the LGBTQ community, but you also happen to be Black, there needs to be some coordination between these disparate groups toward collective objectives. So organizing is going to be key. Organizing is going to be important. So I talked to a friend about homeowner associations, because the thing is, you don't just have to be at work. Your HOA is a great way to start. Connecting with your neighbors, identifying what's important, identifying who's who lives where and what, who to avoid, who to watch out for, and also who can potentially be your ally. I recommend, back during World War I, when was it we had freedom gardens? I think that was World War I. We had freedom gardens where people were growing extra food and stuff for the troops. I recommend that we actually start that up again. I recommend that we actually start having local gardens. We start gardening together again, because it's all outdoor. People can be at their own different plants or whatever. But even if you're gardening inside your home, you can have gardening clubs where you just coordinate what you're going to do, what you're going to grow. Maybe, this neighbor over here is growing cucumbers. This neighbor over here is growing tomatoes. So as we go into the winter, as we go into flu season, we don't have to go to supermarkets and whatnot for everything that we need. You could go down to, Miss Susan's house where she's got some tomatoes and get some tomatoes from her, have a nice little conversation, socially distance on her front porch or whatever, go back to your home. Whenever she needs some cucumbers, you got them. Because you're growing in a hydroponic setup in your garage or whatever. That's controlled. So the thing is, if we can start doing that, if we can start doing for one another and start connecting, and some of y'all are already doing this, but we've got to expand that energy to other individuals. We've got to expand our circles and bring other people in and get to know people that can be utilized as resources. Because like I said, the authoritarians are on board. They're all on the same page and they're pushing forward their agenda as we speak. They're going to try to steal the elections. I'm hoping we can do this in a landslide, but even if it's in a landslide, if you stop counting that landslide before it can build any kind of momentum and throw it to the courts, then these courts are going to do what they want to do. And yeah, I'm with that too, Lee. Growing is good, but learning to can good for longevity is better. I'm totally with that. I think it should start with gardening because I think it's something that you can teach children that's really easy for them to learn. Because the thing is, we haven't been learning how to interact with this planet for a long time. We've left it up to corporations in regard to how we grow our food, in regard to how we process our food, and even how we keep our food. What you're talking about in regard to canning, I think, is an important step. But I think first and foremost, we need to learn how to grow the food, and they're not mutually exclusive. I think you can teach and you can learn how to can foods and process your harvest as you're growing. I think everybody should be growing consistently throughout the year. We shouldn't just have one growing season. I think in every single home, as long as we have climate controlled residences. And so you can grow 1 or 2 tomato plants in your home. And whatever you have extra, you're able to trade with your neighbor. We need to start bringing back that kind of bartering system and having these communication opportunities with one another and teaching each other what we know. So I feel like once we get there, once we're able to build that network, once we're able to share with one another again, we'll be able to get over some of this isolation that we're dealing with right now. That's keeping us, that's giving us all this cabin fever and anxiety. So we'll be able to get over the isolation by being able to interact with other people. Oftentimes I only hear my own voice during the day. But B, we are laying the bed for a network that can be utilized later on as things start to get more hectic, because climate change is not going away. What we're dealing with now is this is the first time in years that Arctic ice is not formed by October. We're seeing permafrost releasing methane into the atmosphere. That's going to hasten this feedback loop of warming up the planet. So we're going to start to see more and more extreme weather patterns. We're going to have some major snowstorms. Some major snowstorms are coming. We already have some snow that's falling in the Midwest, and Chicago came through, but we're going to see more intense snowstorms. And people are going to be screaming, "Oh, I thought it was global warming. Why is it snowing?" No, climate change, meaning that the weather patterns are going to get more intense. So that means they're going to need each other more in ways that we didn't, and fascists are going to be using these extreme situations and making them worse. So we are pushed against one another. But if we can build a network now where a snowstorm hits, we don't have emergency services coming through to help because that budget's been cut to fuel the police force. So now I got to go and I got to shovel Miss Gertrude's driveway. Or the McGillicuddy family, they're low on food right now, and they just have a station wagon. And so, we need to figure out how we're going to get them some fruits and vegetables until we can get them out or dig them out. Coordinate, communicate, connect. That's how we fight right now. Stock up on all your ammo, go buy your deep freezer, fill it up with, as much meat as you possibly can. I'm not saying don't prepare, but coordinate, communicate, and connect. Start checking on your friends and your family on a regular basis. Make it a habit. Let them know that you're good. Let them know that you're alive. Make it so if they don't hear from you, they feel something is wrong because we've become too accustomed to ignoring how other people feel. And that is by design. That's what makes it harder for us to have empathy when other people are suffering, which makes it easier for authoritarians to exploit the weak because we don't care. But if we coordinate, we communicate, and we connect, caring inevitably comes out of that equation. And when you can care, you can get a lot of shit done. All right, people. Be safe. I might check in before election time because this is good. This helps me get a lot of stuff off my chest. But yeah, we're back in full effect. Everybody is back. As far as the different shows that we have going on. So yeah, check out Hair of the Dog, Digital Liberation Front Live here with me. We have a lot of people who are writing for us. We have a lot of people doing a lot of things, behind the scenes, because we're trying to build that community because we recognize the importance of having that, here. I love you guys. Be safe. And I will talk to you later.